in any way, please reach out to me and I'll do what I can. Thank you for asking me.
Any other public comment? Okay. Approval of minutes from 3 February 2025. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, reports and updates. We are very lucky to have two student groups, Saga and Bloom, with us. They might, maybe we can go out of order. We need a few more minutes.
Yeah, Erin said she was coming with another student.
Okay, I would go with yes. Yes, okay. So we'll let Mike, is that okay if you do the report, Mike?
Absolutely. So happy March to everyone. I think we've seen all kinds of weather in the last couple of weeks, from 50 degrees to snow to ice. It's a really interesting way to spend one's winter. Thinking about the weather. So I'd like to start my report just identifying our service promise, which is interrupting educational inequities and creating schools where every child and staff member thrives, one conversation at a time. Our student enrollment for March is at 1349, a difference of 4 from when we last took a look in February. In terms of staffing update, you'll notice that it's hiring season. For a while there, it was mostly just the intervention and support staff across the district that we're looking, but we are having some openings. We have some movement in Swans. They're looking for a 6-8 teacher and a K2 teacher. We also have a middle-level science position at Mount Desert and a guidance counselor position for Tremont. In specials, Southwest Harbor will be looking for a music teacher. At Trenton, 60% art and 40% librarian over at Tremont. Still looking for speech-language pathologists at 2 of our schools, and those schools will be sending out new blasts for those positions, both in paper and on the online services. Behavior interventionists at both Pennatic and Tremont. Pennatic will be pending their budget passage at their town meeting. Connors Emerson is looking for a special ed teacher. And then across the district, ed techs, bus drivers, always looking for folks who want to be the first face that children see in the morning and inviting them to school and driving the bus. So if you're out there and you've always wanted to be a bus driver, to be that smiling face for our kids, please give us a call. We have the food service position at the high school, as you heard from the high school meeting, and always looking for substitutes and custodian position on Swans and at Connors Emerson. I think Connors Emerson is mostly through their process. And again, my report is on the AOS website on the right side, and people can go there and then click on that link and they can see the opportunities across the district specifically. Some highlights from around the district since the last time we've met. At MDI High School, they have launched a new mentorship program that involves upperclassmen supporting lowerclassmen. This is the first year. They've talked about it for years, and it's something they're starting. And so it'll be interesting to hear how that progresses along. Like you heard at the high school meeting, the unified basketball team had their annual game against the staff. I was not asked to be on the staff team. I don't know if that was because I was too good. One of the things that I saw is that the Art 1 film rotation, we learned at the high school meeting how they're doing the rotation through some of the CTE, and they highlighted that one of the art groups did a production unit where they filmed the scene using industry standards, so what you would see in a normal filming of a production, and the students had a chance to participate in that. At the Ashley Bryan School out on Islesford, they held a Vision of a Graduate session. It was tied to their budget discussion where the principal presented, And I think they had about 20 people on the island to sort of talk about the vision of a graduate. I think other than the high school session that we had, it was the largest. So kudos to the folks on Islesford who came out to talk with Julie and Rhonda about sort of their sense of what a graduate could look like today. Rick Alley came to the school and shared paintings and stories about birds of Islesford. We're here at the Willow Museum, and the kids are going to be going over there later in the spring. And a couple weeks ago, they had their Teaching and Learning Collaborative Spirit Week, which meant that all of the schools that are part of the TLC collaborative along the coast of Maine all had the same Spirit Week, and then they interacted with each other during that day and throughout the week as part of that. And as you know, the Frenchboro School, we're going to be working on their budget this year and continuing to support that school in terms of what it might look like to keep the school open for next year as that goes through the process. For Connors Emerson, if you've been by the school, you'll notice that some steel is up. And for what we're calling Zone 1s for the new building. So that's really exciting. The math counts team placed third at the state competition, and 7th graders in social studies engaged in a hands-on mapping activity to explore human migration patterns, both forced and those by choice. Over at Trenton, they participated like our other 8th graders in the freshman parent night at the high school. 7th and 8th graders, the chorus members of that group went to Peter Pan in Boston. And our AOS summer school is going to be returning to Trenton. So actually those applications have gone out and we are well on the way of sort of planning that. So I appreciate both the community and the school in supporting Trenton as sort of being our hub for right now for our summer school. And I know that Scott Watson has been working with the staff across the district in maintenance to figure out a way to sort of help that process be even easier in terms of not only being able to take care of Trenton because they're going to have all of this activity, but also looking at our other schools and is there a way to maybe do a pilot of having large groups of maintenance staff go to a school and do things like floors and stuff like that, so that gets done really quickly, and then maintenance staff can work more on the things they never get a chance to, and so he's exploring that with a couple of the schools. Over at Pematic, Mrs. Knowles' class had a visit from Birdsacre to learn about owls, turkeys, vultures, and hawks, and they're going to be doing a trip this spring. The 7th and 8th graders completed their air rockets, and they beat the state record, which was held by Westbrook, your former school, at 344 feet, and that is sort of part of the design and STEAM program that they have at Pematic. It's a modern version of what I used to do as a science teacher at Connors Emerson, when we would do physics and make bottle rockets out of 1-liter bottles and then talk about air pressure and water, which was sort of the fuel to it, and then are there design factors that would make your rocket go higher based on water and air pressure. They're designing them with 3D printers based on air, and then certain ways you put the fins and all of that to test them out. So a pretty neat idea, much better than what I used to do. And then 5th and 8th graders went to watch UMaine basketball women's team play. Over on Swans, the Pine Tree Flyers visited and performed a concert. They're sort of a New England band, kind of reminds you of Irish music, and they teach dancing, and some of the kids actually danced while they were there. Their basketball team headed to the airline school for a game, so oftentimes with that group, we have teams go out there and play the Swans, and then they also go to some of the smaller schools within the county to sort of play them, and it's actually a sort of like a day event. And in K2, some of the things that they have been doing, they've been writing about science and been focusing on what plants need to grow and survive in severe weather. Look at that, I even looked at this a couple times and spelled severe wrong, so editing is important. And that'll be fixed before it goes on the website. Over at Mount Desert, they had a design challenge in art using recycled materials for clothing, and if you went into the school during that time, you would see mannequins set up. Really cool. stuff that happens there. Flowers were delivered to the staff prior to the February break as to teachers from the PTO, and kindergartners, students learned how to make bread with Miss Patty. And over in Tremont, grades 2, 3, and 4 went ice fishing. Tatia Bauer spoke to the middle school scientists about marsh restoration. She was from the Maine Coast Heritage Trust and work that they're going to do. And 4th graders learned to snowshoe at the Kelly Farm Preserve. And so, again, you know, one of the neat things about that part of my report is just to get a sense of the wealth of things that our students are doing, both academically and outside of academics, to sort of broaden their understandings. And for you all who sort of help watch over all of that, have a sense of all those wonderful things that are happening in our schools across the district. In terms of our budgets, we are coming down the stretch. I can tell you that January and February are crazy, as March is as well, as we're moving through it, but you know, we're getting to the end. Majority of our schools have at least passed their budgets at the school level, and 2 of our have finished, actually passed their meetings, so passed their official, what we will call budget meeting with the citizens. So the AOS budget that was passed, and Swans Island passed theirs. The upcoming meetings coming up is we have Cranberry Isle actually this Saturday, and then after that we have the high school coming up in April, and then we have the town meetings that go through May and some in June. On this slide, everything that is in yellow will show you what the FY26 budget is for that community. What the overall, the first percentage is the budget, and the second is the assessment for that. And you can see for most of our schools we're done. We have Trenton tomorrow will be approving their budget, and then Frenchboro is going to do next week. Will do their preliminary and their first draft right in the same at the same time. And then on this slide you will see when the town meetings are for the various schools. MDIRSS updates. Just a couple of things. The last visit of a graduate will be April 2nd over on the Swans Island schools. So Swans Island folks show up. Maybe you could beat the turnout that Cranberry Island had. So we'll see if we can make it a competition. And then we're going to sort of shift to speaking with students and other ways of sort of gathering that information. And then I just wanted to give just an RPC update. There's another more in-depth update coming up after this in terms of conversations that I have had around, you know, how we're progressing with our plan. I went and spoke to the MDI Lions Club in Southwest Harbor last week. I'm going to be meeting with the League of Towns on March 25th. Tomorrow, meeting with teacher association reps. And then this week, I'm going to sit with Selena and start scheduling staff update meetings like we did in October to get a sense of sort of where we are. So I wanted to get a sense of some of the outreach that's sort of going on in that work. And then the staff spotlight. I was in the curriculum office a couple of weeks ago, and Lynn Bean Ingram's name came up. She's the middle school social studies teacher in Pematic, and a bunch of work that she's been doing on the social studies scope and sequence for our grades within the curriculum. So a shout out to the work that all of our teachers do, who sort of are subject area experts in that, work with not only their colleagues across the district, but the curriculum office as we sort of cycle through some of our curriculum work. And then, you know, in thinking about our front office staff, oftentimes those folks that are right in our front office, I would consider those our first responders. So our secretaries and admin assistants that are, you know, sometimes it's called the fishbowl, depending on how your school is designed. But I wanted to shout out to all of the folks who do that work and meet our parents. Sometimes they meet our parents at their best, and sometimes they meet our parents at their worst. And they do a wonderful job in helping them get the information they need, so their days can move on and be successful as they're bringing their kids into us. And so from Trenton, that would be Steph Roguski. At Tremont, Susan McIsaacs. At Pematic, it's Christy Smith and Dempsey McEnroe. Over at Mount Desert, we have Miranda Clow and Sandy Boyce. On Swans, it's Abby Dye, Connors Emerson, Taylor Hammer, and Susanna Asuma. At the high school, we have Angelique, who's the face you see first, and then there's Mary Clara, who you might speak on the phone if you're trying to get a hold of the principal or Wendy Littlefield. And then in my office, it's Selena Dunbar and Karen Shields. When you walk in that door, and then those folks who are dealing on the phone with special ed would be Eliza. And they do a wonderful job of, at least in my office, and I think for principals, is sort of helping to set the stage for folks who are coming to see us or welcoming people. So I just sort of thank them and the work that they do in our buildings. And then reorganization, there'll be more on that in this meeting. Our next meeting is Wednesday, and we're going to be talking about debt and community messaging. And again, you can go to the AOS reorganization website and you can take a look at the information that we have to date on what we'll eventually start bringing out to communities and community meetings to gather feedback on the work that the RPC has done to date. And then School Board Corner, I just want folks to know that state superintendents, it was last week, met with the Commissioner Mankin to discuss recent challenges between the federal government and the Maine DOE. You know, the biggest message there was a recognition is that stuff is coming at us really fast, but that doesn't mean we have to respond that way in terms of the work that we have to do. And the Maine DOE has done a really good job of helping superintendents know what to pay attention to and what not. So I appreciated that time that they provided for all of us. And a couple bills that have been in the news recently, at least through Maine Public Radio, was LD 370 on increasing math requirement at the high school to 3 years. I think for the state right now it's 2. When a survey went out, about 97% of schools already do that. We do that here at MDI. And then there was a bill around the requiring cursive writing, and basically that's kind of got pushed back to the DOE to gather more information. Here in our district, it's sort of an individual school decision, and in terms of cursive writing, it's not part of the main learning results and wasn't part of our work that we did with our foundation standards, so it's not something we currently teach overtly within the curriculum. And that's my update.
Questions for Mike? Okay, so now we will welcome Saga and Beam to intro with Saga.
We also have students who are being civil rights.
And,
I don't know that they want to speak, but they are here. I wanted to make sure. That's, I had no sense before. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are welcome to speak if you want. So we just start with Saga, is that correct?
We should go up there, right?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Civil rights, anyone wants to join us. How's that? Hi, my name is Noreen Hogan. I'm the advisor for Saga. It was formerly known as GSDA, Gay Straight Diversity Alliance. Saga stands for Sexuality and Gender Alliance, and we have it backwards. And if folks thank you very much. So basically, we wanted to thank Jessica mostly for letting us know about this meeting. I think Saga is one of the oldest clubs in the school for over 20 years. I can't even tell you how far back it goes. And the one message I've gotten from students is there might be a dozen plus students who are members of the club. They come and they go, but there's a lot more that don't attend the club, and that's okay. The key thing is they've said to me, a few of them, that they feel better and safer that the club exists. So I want to thank the school for their support of the LGBTQ plus students at our school. Either one of you want to say anything?
I would like to say that earlier today, I got my passport back and they refused to turn the gender to X. So,
And I just wanted to a lot of these bills and things are being passed very quickly, and it can be scary and overwhelming to try to adjust to what's being done. Like, we just want all the students in the school to feel supported and safe, and it's been hard to accomplish that. This year's been a little rough with the fight and different things going out, and like, we just want to know that we're still supported even during these tough times. And even if you can't say that directly in writing or in school policies and whatnot, just still practicing these different things that we already have going for us is going to help a lot of people continue to feel safe and feel seen and heard. Thank you.
Thank you for coming, and I think we can say it directly to the board. We are supportive, and that is our goal, is to, nothing is perfect, and it's always a work in progress, but our intention is to be supportive of what we place and to share that with our policies and policies. That's our goal. So thank you so much for coming and sharing. It's always really helpful for us as a board to work with students to know what your experience is on and what you're like at school, so we can better students. What is being in your house?
Hi, darlings. You're looking at me like I'm, come on.
We don't want to put anyone on the spot, so
They're-
share what you want to share with us about your school.
Yeah, and they're happy to do it. They like to have a little crutch, which is me.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Gabby. Gabriella, everyone calls me Gabby. I'm Damia. I'm Ashley. We're here to talk about BEAM and basically what it means to us. So for me, BEAM is like a community inside of a community. We meet like once a month.
They want to meet once a week.
Yeah. So we meet once a month. Like for me, I've been here for 4 years. BEAM started in my freshman year, I think, and ever since, that's where I met most of my friends. And that's just like where I met even family. So we've been just like sticking together, creating this environment for each other, and just like sticking with each other. And that's just what it's been for me. So BEAM stands for BIPOC Emotional and Mental Health. And for me, I moved here in Maine. I've been here since I was 10. And it was very different because like my school is predominantly white. So for me, I thought I was always like the odd one out. Like I never had anyone who would understand like whether it was like a joke going around that would offend me, like I had no one to talk to about it. And so coming to high school was amazing because like I have these people who get it, like they really get it. And I have friends from like all over the school, but this is just a space where I can talk to people about how something may have made me feel, and I'm not judged, and they understand it. And it's not only a safe space, but it's a fun place. Like we hang out and we talk, and it's a great time. And we also started building another BEAM club at the Pine Residency School. That's going amazing. We had our second meeting with the kids just since recently. That's going amazing. I just want to say thank you to the school for like supporting us all these years, and I hope you continue to. She's not
She's not usually a talker, is it a no? Okay. That's what they wanted to say. So.
Well, thank you so much. don't have any fancy shirts nor a flag. Sure.
Okay, hello. We're the Civil Rights Team, and we just kind of wanted to talk a little bit. We didn't prepare anything, so here we go. We at the school, we've been able to fortunately focus on a lot of different projects. We've organized gatherings for Martin Luther King Jr. Day every year when weather allows. We've been working on a condom availability project and resources on sexual health, and currently we are planning to put together more resources that will go for like pamphlets, stuff like that, so students and also adults know their rights, things like that, things that pertain to what's going on in the world right now. We want everyone to feel safe in this school and feel educated, so we want to make sure that we have resources available and that we're always providing a space where people can come and talk with us or come and work on projects with us, and we really appreciate the school being so welcoming to that and helping us with funding or space or advertisement, so we really appreciate the support and we hope that it will be continued.
If I can voice too, we have two founding members of the mentorship program that you just heard about earlier, Lulu and Mai, which is incredible. Three of these folks are on the anti-racism task force as well, which is of course relevant to this conversation. I'm a part of it. Simone's a part of Eco Team as well. And if I can speak as an educator too, as a fourth year educator coming to a school and wanting to do work on these topics and more importantly support students doing this work. Even though I applied anywhere and everywhere, I couldn't imagine a better place to be, specifically because of not just the boards district-wide, but our school specifically support for these types of projects and uplifting these students. And instead of an immediate question, if a student has an idea, or for any of our projects that we've done, it being a question of like, why is that necessary, rather how can we support, and that's what we're asking for.
Thank you. That's something for all the groups we have. Also, you're always welcome to reach out to us, or you can email me or call me, or if you want to be available to any student. So be in touch, and we'll have you guys back again to share with us again. Thank you so much for coming. You guys are welcome to stay, but don't feel like you have to hang out. Okay, this brings us to directors of teaching and learning.
Good evening, everybody. I'm just going to go over the couple of things that were in the March note. On Friday, we have our March PD Day coming up, and we have Trevor Reagan from the Learner Lab coming to talk with our teachers and staff. Julie and I had gone to a curriculum coordinator meeting last spring and saw Trevor speak, and he was so inspirational, and he uses research. He explains the research, but then he also teaches how to apply the research, and it's about mindfulness and making safe spaces for our children and for our staff. And so really looking forward to hearing him again. And then we have the NAEP results. And so we know that Maine didn't fare very well compared to other states in the nation, but unfortunately that test is designed to look at a state as a whole. We don't get any district data, we don't get school or individual student data, so it really is this snapshot of how the state is doing. not every student gets tested. They randomly pick which schools they come to and test students. And the standards that they're testing against are their own standards. They're not Common Core, they're not main learning results. So to compare the results from that test to like the NWEA, which is our main through year assessment, can't really do that. And, I reached out to Regina Lewis, who is the NAEP coordinator, and she let us know that really the basic level on the NAEP is pretty much the same as our proficiency on the main through year. So, and the basic isn't included in the meeting expectations on the NAEP. So it really is hard to kind of compare. We're comparing apples and oranges when we look at those two tests. And then on Thursday, we have our district administrator team retreat, and continuing to work with Great Schools Partnership on our MTSS, particularly Tier 1. We are working with All Learners Network, and we're having Erin Oliver, our school coach, join us remotely, and she talks with us about math instruction. Then the other part of that is the professional growth system, and really digging into that and spending some time in the afternoon. And we're also reading chapter 5 from Street Data and discussing that. So those are our three big buckets that we're looking at on Thursday.
Are there questions for Rhonda? Okay, moving on to the Organization Planning Committee update. Back to Mike.
What everybody's been waiting for. The group has been meeting, I think the first meeting was in March of last year. And we have been meeting, monthly, walking through all the aspects of a plan that you have to put out to community and eventually share with the state in terms of a plan, and then eventually ask voters to vote on it. And that group has been really thoughtful in terms of the process and all the different ideas in talking about and trying to imagine what a unified school district would look like for all of our schools. And a reminder, what municipalities exist within our system, and that would be, if you look at the compass rows up there, those are all the towns that are part of AOS91 and are participating in the RPC. So that's Southwest Harbor, Swans, Tremont, Trenton, Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, Cranberry Isle, and Frenchboro. And so that compass point is also on our working agreements that we follow as we're discussing topics. And sometimes when they're harder, we have to revert to those to make sure we're following protocol, but that's some of the earlier work that we did. And one of the things that we mention every time we're thinking about a decision is that the children are our North Star. And so always thinking about the decisions that will eventually, the proposal that we'll bring to communities, we're really putting the children first in terms of what that looks like as we think about it. And so we had an update back in October. It was time now in March to sort of see where we are as we get closer to finalizing what the proposal might look like, and we start thinking about taking it out to communities after that. So a little beginning, and I'm going to read this because it was sort of the driving force before we even met with the previous board and some of the members on that team working on sort of reigniting our reorganization efforts. And that was that AOS91's effort is to reorganize its current structure from a collection of individual schools into a coherent and more equitable model to better serve our students and educators. It makes sense to look at how we can provide the best education for all of our students with our collective resources. The current organization creates separate and unequal budgets that lead to disparities in educational program and opportunities and is redundant and costly to taxpayers. And so that was sort of the guiding principle when we started our work. And the goals and outcomes are same as what I shared, but I wanted to make sure that those were out there. And that goal of achieving the greatest level of educational excellence for every single child within the available resources, to form one school system for all of the MDI region students pre-K through 12, so that every child, no matter where they come from, has equitable access to opportunity and resources to thrive and grow to become positive contributing members of our community. To create one budget that is shared equitably so that no matter in which community you live, the value of your property is taxed similarly for the purposes of education across the district. To become a single employer, to better support the needs of staff, both professionally, economically, and educationally, and to help strategically meet building needs across any new district. The hopeful outcomes are stronger and better coordinated curriculum across schools, and the idea of planning 7-8 middle school within existing resources based on work that had been done by previous boards and groups to more efficiently design and deliver special education programs and services such as SUN or behavior programming, greater access to extra and co-curricular activities, more opportunities for middle school students to form successful peer groups and be grouped for teaching in a manner that best meets their needs, and more efficient use of physical resources. In terms of the regional planning committee, these are the members that are part of that group from all of our towns. At the moment, we had a Southwest Harbor community member have to drop off, and so we're looking for a new community member for Southwest Harbor. But this list is up on the website as well, and you can contact people. Their emails are there. The components of a plan. So this is sort of like what the state says has to be a sort of part of your plan. There's 13 components. The highlighted pieces are the ones that we covered, and I'll address those this evening. I've already identified the communities included, what a new board might look like in size and composition and how it votes, the idea of what happens to local school boards, and we kind of came up with a very creative answer to that in terms of thinking about local control and voice, property ownership, debt, and then there's administrative things that more happen at the central office level, working with staff and in terms of CPAs and those folks on contracts. Then there's the disposition of school funds and reserve balances. We still have to talk about that, and we'll be getting into that on Wednesday. Transition plan for a new budget, documentation of public meetings. I think I've said all along, the law says you just need to do one meeting. We're going to do meetings in every single community once the plan is ready to go out. Then there is approval of the plan. I don't know why that. Oh, the approval plan. What that means is, okay, if you have a bunch of towns voting, is it all or nothing, or is there something else? And then you'll see that in the slides when I get there. You have to identify cost savings, and then there's this other matters. Part of that is the cost sharing model. How are we going to fund this? And then a pre-K-12 organizational model if you're going to do something different with students across the district. So governance, we came down with an at-large, and a lot of you, some of this is going back over, but I think it's important to sort of remember we are looking at an at-large representation with the residency requirement, which means that board members elected by the voters of the school district as a whole, rather than solely by your town of residence. And the residency requirement ensures that each seat is filled by a candidate that is a resident of the town designated for that seat. So, and looking at all of our communities, we came up with our at-large model that would have a total of 15 members for that overall board. 3 of them Bar Harbor, 3 Mount Desert, 2 for Southwest, Tremont, and Trenton, 1 each for the outer islands. And that's where we got the 15. And this is different than a model that a lot of the RSUs that were built and then fell apart were more based on a representation based on just solely on the population, and then their votes were weighted, and that meant that smaller communities felt disenfranchised. I think this model, with the residency requirement and at-large voting, a bunch of other communities have chose that and allows for even some of those smaller towns to still have a voice in that larger picture. And so this is what we'll be putting out to the community in terms of what that RSU board would look like, or could look like. And so just as a visual, you would have your 15-member board, and then that board would be made up of subcommittees, finance, buildings, and then below that will be the sort of local advisory council. I'll explain those in a minute. And then our school advisory councils were an attempt to solidify local voice and are chaired by the principal and come from two models. One was from an organization that works with, wrote down a moment. It was the National Labor Management Partnership, and it was put together by the National Association of Teachers and also the National Superintendents and a variety of principal organizations. But they also partnered with the NEA and the MPA and groups in Vermont and Rhode Island and New Jersey to think about how you can heighten the voice of your local school within those communities. And then the other model we looked at was the Massachusetts Site Council model, where they don't have individual school boards within their school districts, but they have these site councils. They are set in law. The National Labor Management Partnership is something that you work with labor and come up with models to support decision-making within your local schools. The Massachusetts one is within law, but it has some of the same flavor. And the idea is that each school would have a council, and of course the size of that school would sort of help enliven what that might look like in terms of size. So a Cranberry Island Site Council will look very different than Montezet Island High School Site Council or a Trenton Site Council. But they would still have a parent membership, a staff member, the school board member from the RSU board, and the principal. And their basic core functions are providing advice and recommendations to the school principal and eventually to that district board. They would help review the budget prior to it coming up and amassing the larger budget, have input in hiring for the administrator for that building. Of course, school teacher hiring would remain the same as it is now, but then that final vote for a person would come at the RSU board, but all of that input would happen at the school level as it does now. Identifying school environment and learning goals particular to that school and their needs, and helping sort of set those broader goals for each of those schools, just like our principals do right now, but sort of doing that with a modified leadership team. And schools will have an opportunity to sort of think of what that might look like. And then that link that's there, and this presentation will be up on the website, is a more in-depth look at the site council proposal and all the details, and folks can click on it and sort of see that in detail. Next was the cost sharing for the RSU. And so what I wanted to show here is sort of, basically what our calculations are on how we're currently paying for the cost of education, K through 12 in all of our towns, and what that is like for a $400,000 value home in each of those communities, what the model we have for the high school, and then what our proposed model. But I'll go back to the value statement, and that is that similarly situated taxpayer. The idea that we would create one budget that is shared equitably so that no matter which community you live, the value of your property is taxed similarly for the purposes of education. So you could think about how municipalities are funded. The idea that a municipality funds roads and they take a certain percentage of your tax, they do that equitably, and then all the roads get paved and taken care of. But we don't drive on every single road, but we still want to make sure that that road is taken care of for the residents in our community. And I think education is a much higher common good than making sure that our roads are passable for everyone. But the idea that we want to make sure that students within our district have the same opportunity regardless of where they live. And so we want to make sure that we're all participating in ways in creating equitable funding for all those kids, and that this model is kind of built on that. The high school model is that was created when the high school was created is a mix of valuation and enrollment. And at the time came up with the 67% for evaluation of your town, 33% for the enrollment of the students that go to school in your community. And so valuations oftentimes fluctuate, so there's a 3-year average on that to manage that. And then enrollment is based on an average between your October count and the previous year's October count and April count that goes to the state. And then in the high school, we have tuition folks, and that's set at a state average. And within the AOS, Trenton, Swans, Cranberry, Frenchboro, and any other town that has choice pays that amount to come to the high school. Now, in terms of what it looks like right now across the schools that are within the AOS, you can sort of see. So this is a full value home at around $400,000. And you can see right now, for the cost of education for K-12, that's what residents in those towns pay towards the cost of education. And so just by looking at those numbers, you sort of get a sense how there's that disparity in terms of what that looks like across the board when we're all trying to do the same thing. We've come together in the past to create a high school to take care of our 15-year-olds to 22-year-olds within a high school environment. And I think the point of the reorganization committee is, why can't we do that for our pre-K through 22-year-olds? And we have a model where we've been able to do that, and it's been pretty successful. And so the proposed model for funding is using a starting point with what we already know is the 67-33. And so this is part of our proposal, but in year 2 to go to an 80-20, 80% valuation, 20% enrollment. And again, using that 2 to 3 year average within valuation in terms of making so you're managing sort of those high and lows. And when you do that 80-20, those numbers you'll see get close. They don't become perfect, but they get closer together. But when you're working on trying to find an equitable model for funding, there'll be that little bit of a mix of people coming down or potentially people coming up to be able to ensure that we have equitable funding for our pre-K through 12 students across the district if it's something we choose to do. And so that's what the cost sharing model will look like. In terms of the question of school ownership, and we went through this, is within the statute, the new RSU takes on stewardship of the schools from those towns. And state statute right now is highly protective of member towns' school buildings and their rights, which basically mean that an RSU can't close a school, that takes the vote of those voters. The only way a school would close is if there's a building that replaced it. And if you think about Skowhegan, where they're building a overall school that's going to support students who are even earlier than pre-K birth up to grade 12, through the community discussions that happened there, is that they are going to close some schools to be able to build the center, but those were all done through votes of those particular towns as they were building that. We're not doing that here, but that's just sort of an example of that process and the fact that those voters had to vote to be able to do that, to build what they're trying to do in Skowhegan. And there's other districts, Oxford Hills is another school district that's sort of looking at those pieces because their numbers are vastly different than ours. In terms of the idea on the debt question, and existing debt means is that any bond or note or loan agreement or lease purchase agreement or other debt instrument issued prior to July 1st of the operating year of an RSU. So the first year if it's voted, there's a year where you build the budget, and then the next year would be the first operational year for the budget structure, that organizational piece would start then. And so the idea in state statute is that the original owner of that debt would ultimately remain responsible for that for any new school district. But a reorganization committee and a plan can include the parties' debt and assign that and figure something out as part of the plan that voters would vote on. The RPC is currently sort of reevaluating options for what we're calling any new capital debt assumption by a proposed RSU. So that would be a brand new building like sort of Bar Harbor. We have come down on recognizing that in our current budgets for 24-25, there's various lease agreements, there's some loans at the high school, there's bus lease agreements, and that currently in our economical model is that we're assuming all of that. But we're going to take a look at some of those, that bigger capital debt piece, and relook at that. And then the proposed model. And you saw me propose 4 models back in January 23. And as conversations have continued at the RPC level, those have grown. And recognition that this is a proposed model. It's going to be where we start when we go out to the communities. Starting with that 7-8 middle school, that idea of honoring the work of the that committee and recognizing that in the way that we're currently structured, there's going to be no new building for that. However, we do have buildings that can house that if we're thinking creatively. And some work that was done by some teachers and people on the committees, this idea floated. And so I'll start on the right side in thinking of the idea of a 7-8 middle school, which with our current enrollment, it would be in Pematic. So all 7th and 8th graders from across the district would go to Pematic. It's about 194 students. Pematic is centrally located. It's about 13 miles from Connors Emerson, from Trenton, Mount Desert, 3 miles from Tremont. It has some really interesting STEAM programming that happened there that would really benefit middle school students in the work that they do. Kind of honors the work of the middle school subcommittee in terms of focusing on that particular group, of bringing them together in one place to meet their needs. I think that the in-town location for Pematic has some benefits because of the businesses and institutions that exist around it in terms of when you're thinking about a real middle school program and getting kids out in your community, whether that's for internships. So you have the Wendell Green Museum, you have the Butterfly Garden, you have the Coast Guard, you have the Sailing Center, and then you have a variety of businesses that could be partners. There's the bike shop in terms of education for those kids. So when you really start thinking about it, and you have the library right across the street, there's a variety of opportunities that are there that made that really interesting for the group, and which is what we'll share when we start talking about the communities, because there's give and take when we start thinking about these things. And then it would the idea of removing the impression of the haves and have-nots. I think that is kind of an idea that sits in a lot of adults' heads. I don't know if it sits in the students' heads. There is that question of, in terms of, right now, for years now, our kids have been participating in AYS programming with cross sports. They've been doing swimming. They've been doing Acadia Fire. And so there's all these opportunities that our kids are already mixing and having opportunities in that they didn't have before. And I think some of that have-not stuff exists more with us than it does with our students. But it's a way of seeing us as a whole. Honestly, part of my work when I do the superintendent's report, and I go through each school, school by school, that was deliberate to make sure you saw all of our students and you saw all of our staff doing really great work across the district. And so that's really important. And so, I think that idea of bringing our 7th graders together, we do it at the high school, we could do it at the middle school. What can we do to continue that process? So I'm kind of passionate about that. In terms of what that looks like for our elementary schools, yeah, that changes some things. They would become pre-K 6 schools for Tremont, Trenton, Bar Harbor, Mount Desert. Cranberry would maintain, they do have that 7-8 right now choice to be able to go on. There's no student taking advantage of that right now because they don't have those students in those grade levels. But it's been a great opportunity, and those kids who have participated in that will share with you that it's made their high school experience so much better. The same thing with Swans. Right now, I don't think that's something that you would want to grow to and make it as a possibility to participate in that, but it's not something that would have to happen right away. It's something that you can sort of think about. And then Frenchboro, currently without students. There are models in some island communities, particularly in Massachusetts, where some schools that no longer have daily students have changed into satellite programs for science. For Swans, it could be around fishing and oceanographic studies. So there's a variety of things that you could think about doing if that school was in a larger district, to be able to think about how we can utilize that gem that's out there that supports our students, whether that's middle school or high school, maybe think about using it differently. And then so the question is, Southwest Harbor, what happens? You will lose a community school for your youngest kids, but you have this wonderful community school for those middle school students. And so the idea is those parents can be provided choice in terms of utilizing either Tremont as the place to go because it's 3 miles away, or potentially parents who might work in Bar Harbor and can have choice and send their kids there. If they work there, they could drop them off there. And then the remaining could go to Mount Desert. And so that's sort of the guts of Model 5B. Of course, Mount Desert High School remains the same. And what happens if the towns, Swans, Cranberry, Isle, and Frenchboro, they continue to have choice within their schools. That's within the statute. And so they would remain choice even if they were part of an RSU.
Can you just clarify, it's the kids in Southwest Harbor that would have choice, the others?
Yes, because they would still be in their community school. Yeah.
Could you also clarify when you say provide choice, is it either Tremont or Mount Desert or anywhere they want to go?
I think it would be, those are decisions we're still sort of thinking about how defining that. My sense is that, survey would go out and parents would sort of to choose, and if they had access to be able to drive their kids to Harvard, then they can go and do that, and then the remaining would go to Mount Desert.
The default would be Mount Desert.
But the default would be Mount Desert.
If you said
Yep.
And we haven't necessarily touched on potential regional programming for pre-K, but that would be something we would really want to think about. One of the ideas of the 7-8 middle school at Pematic is that there could be a pre-K there for a couple of communities, and then provide some work for those students to participate in terms of mentoring and things like that, and working within the pre-K. We're already sort of talking about with the idea of moving towards CDS becoming part of our responsibilities of thinking about a 3- and 4-year-old opportunity somewhere within the district to be able to sort of meet those needs. So that stuff is out there. So, this is our starting point that we'll go out and talk about and gather feedback and see where we go. And again, in terms of an organizational model, like when you if you vote for an RSU and it passes, the budget is the first thing, and that organizational structure of governance happens first. Anything after that, people say yes, it's not going to be that first year that you have that new model. That's going to take some talk. It's going to take some conversation with staff to sort of build that out to make sure that schools are prepared, and that's something that will take a little while before you sort of get to that. But our idea is to think big in terms of what opportunities we might be able to provide for our region that we have. And so that's that organizational model. And if any RPC member wanted to chime in on that I didn't cover.
I think that was great. The only thing I would chime in is I would just, I think we on the RPC try to encourage ourselves, and I would encourage viewers of the plan. Like, it's really easy to think like tomorrow what's going to happen, but what we really want to be thinking is like what's going to be the best for kids and what's gonna be the most fiscally responsible and the most educationally advantageous to our students, you know, in 5 years, in 10 years, in 15 years. Like, it's not so much a discussion, like I have 4-year-olds, so it's not so much a discussion of like, where will my 4-year-olds go to school next year? I mean, they're gonna go wherever they're nothing. None of this will all be phased in over periods of years. So like, kids are all gonna go to, everybody's kids are gonna go to whatever school they thought they were gonna go to next year and even the year after that. But what I hope we put ourselves in the mindset of is like, what's the long range best interest of kids?
And then on this slide, that middle school subcommittee report, you can click on that and be able to read it if folks haven't read that and sort of see that was done prior to COVID. But a lot of the tenants are still right on in terms of what the needs are for that group of students. And then the approval plan, meaning how do people vote? So the question is, how will the municipalities that approve a reorganization plan proceed if one or more of the units do not approve the plan? And so we had talked about 4 different things, and the option that was supported is the one that I'll sort of explain it. And the ultimate goal is that all municipalities approve the plan and would like to support all of our communities. But one of the things you want to think about is, you know, particularly for us, you know, a smaller community, do you want a smaller community to, you know, upset the apple cart in terms of what it could be? And so the RPC kind of talked about, okay, what does that, you know, look like? And so they came to the fact that for it to move forward, you would want yes votes from Trenton, Bar Harbor, Southwest, Tremont, and Mount Desert. And those would be the towns that if they all voted yes, it moves forward. And if any one of the outer towns joined, yes, but if there were no votes in the outer island towns, Swans, Cranberry, or Frenchboro, but those major towns voted yes and it would move forward.
I would just clarify, like, I think the whole RPC felt very strongly that, in our opinion, we really want the outer islands to join. We feel like it would be in the best interest of those kids, but we also recognize that they might make a different choice and that we wouldn't stop the process for that. But it was totally not like we don't care, but we would absolutely really want them to join.
And all members represented by that voted, you know, they agreed that this would be the appropriate approval option to put out there when we start going at it. And then sort of the potential timeline, and I think the word potential is really important because things change as you learn more as you go out to communities and start talking. And so, you know, right now we're looking at spring and summer community forums in each town, school staff forums. Of course, as we look at feedback, potential revisions, there would be a review of the plan by the DOE, and the hope is to have a referendum vote in November. Originally, we were thinking of the summertime, but there's no way to sort of get that done, to be really thoughtful and gather the community feedback that we want to gather on a plan. And then that timeline was created by a member of the RPC, Cindy Lambert, that sort of actually starts back in 1963 with looking at the high school and things that happened all along. And I think, as I shared with you last summer, a gentleman came in with a study that was done in 1942 that discussed the reorganization of high schools here on MDI, and Dr. Scheibels was one of the people that was part of that. Now his name is on sort of the university, and that's a very interesting read.
Just a quick question about the timeline. Does the process allow for a do-over if come November we can vote it down in 1 or 2 towns? Can you revisit and make changes and then have another vote, or would everything be null and you'd have to start from scratch?
I am hoping that the feedback that we get will improve what I just shared before any vote happens. And I think that if something failed, it would be the purview of the board to start thinking about if they wanted to continue and learn something, and either, rather than just drop it, maybe like, okay, you learned something, what does that mean? I mean, that'll be something that'll be up to the purview of the board. I would hope that a lot of that feedback we'll get over the next couple months and through the summer in terms of improving, what we're sharing. And so still ahead, there's that budget transition plan. I'm still getting information from the state in terms of what things that I would need to do, guidance on state approval, any more organizational planning model, just sort of thinking about seniority. How would that work? And even if you were a single employer, you would have to think about those aspects of what it might look like. Public meetings, potential revisions, and a vote. And then again, all the information that I shared is on the website at the reorganization part, and so you can see all of that. And there is a FAQ that if you filled it out, questions would come to me and I can answer them. And then, like I said in my superintendent's report, that I'll be going around and starting to hit, now that there's more of a shape around the plan, and speaking to some of those groups that invite me. The Lions invited me, and I was more than happy to go and talk to them. Wonderful conversation. And speaking with Derlin and setting up the time. Derlin, who's the town manager, over in Mount Desert, and knowing that the League of Towns meets, those managers meet every month to sort of start to incorporate them and hear their questions and sort of share this with them. And so more of those opportunities, going back to the school staff, because this is more form than it was sort of the last time. So there's more information to be able to share and to gather feedback as we move forward. So definitely appreciated the hard work of the RPC members, both municipal members and board members who have been part of that work in moving this work forward. And I think I said before, this is the farthest we've come in a long time of actually having an RPC and starting that process. And so we still have a bunch of work to do as we gather feedback from the community.
Questions for Mike?
I just had a question about the voting. I think it was 2 slides back where you had Trenton, Bar Harbor, Southwest listed. So if one of those school votes no, that we don't know.
Yeah, one of those municipalities would go.
Okay. And have you guys thought about like the daily operations? Because this might be small school minded, but I'm thinking of like a 7th grade class trip of like 90 something students, like sports right now. It's 6th through 8th grade, kind of that daily operations that the kids would feel. Do we kind of know what that's looking like yet?
I mean, there has been some discussion, and I could just say as a former principal and a superintendent, when you sort of think about, we do those kinds of things at the high school with 468, 68 students, and so, we would be able to sort of work those things out. When I think about, this actually came up at the Lions discussion in terms of when you think about a pre-K-6 organization and a 7-8 organization. So in a 7-8 organization, you'd have some pretty good skilled players playing sports or doing music at that level and what you're able to do. And oftentimes in a K-8 school, your 5th and 6th graders are kind of relegated to either not participating or sort of being in a club. But if you had a dedicated pre-K-6 school, then those 5th and 6th graders, I think, would have more opportunity to participate in sports activities and then play amongst themselves and some smaller schools that exist within Hancock County. And then the music, I think, options for them too would be at a higher level than it is now, because you would have them in a more concentrated way. And so those kind of things are in my head when I think about those structural things. But I think those are some of the things that you would talk about at community forums. And then as if you pass it, you'll start digging into those more specifically in terms of what it might look like for those kids. But those are things that came to mind as part of the Lions Club conversation and sort of thinking about what that could look like.
So like 190 kids, like in theory, cut it in half. I'm like, how do you get 95 kids on a field trip? So I bet you could do it. I bet you could do it. But I appreciate that the budgeting and the planning, we're going low and slow, so we don't feel too many growing pains. It's just kind of, again, that daily operations. I'm curious how we're gonna work at it to move forward, and that's really what the kids are. They don't budget that. That means to them. So just what is their day going to look like?
And again, we could be phased in as slowly as we need some low and slow. Yeah.
Always, it's a good way of saying it.
It seems like the public forums are gonna be really important, and when you said spring and summer, I had a little tick at the word summer, just thinking about meetings. What are your thoughts about how are you gonna do one per, what's the plan? Is it gonna be one for each community or one for each town? And
Yes.
how are you gonna balance out, summer's a really hard time. I mean, spring and summer are really hard. They're probably the hardest times, especially, when you're kind of ramping things up. So what does that look like? And what if you get 4 people? Like, we had a meeting and the board stayed, but nobody else came.
I'll let Mike respond, but also I think we have envisioned, not in terms of like the state's statute, public forum, but a variety of ways, like Rainy Bench doing some talks with the Historical Society about the history of consolidation, coffee hours, like different qualities of venues to bring out different people to have conversations. So those won't fit within our state statute mandated, public forums, but they are chances for us to hear from the community in ways that we hope to draw different parts of the community so that we're, because not everybody comes to the same kind of events, right? So, but I hear what you're saying. Summer is a challenge.
And I get that as like a complementing the standard meetings, because obviously you're starting with folks. The most captive audience you have are the parents of the kids who are in school right now, right? So like getting their attention in a way that is like, what's the best shot you have at getting their attention in this very short time period in 2 seasons that are very busy?
And that part of Wednesday's work is setting that out, but there will be, something in every community. We said that all along, so there'll be something that centrally at the high school, and then within each of the schools to have forums for community members to come, whether they have kids or not. But like you said, those are going to be the ones.
It's probably obvious, but I would argue that people with kids in school they're the easiest. I think maybe that's what you were saying actually. But we really need to engage. We don't have kids in school who are so loaded, right? That's like the trickiest part because we're like not naturally obsessed. Like we are.
I guess I have follow-up questions related to the timeline. Like, if you have these outreach meetings and you're improving the proposal or whatever between now and November, like, what happens if you're not ready in November? Is there a day by which really you have to have things in motion for all these votes to happen in various towns? And in the RPC, like in the model, like, is there a requirement that we have this figured out within a certain period of time, or is there the potential to extend?
There is a potential to extend, and the deadline that you have for the budget side of it is that the DOE needs to know by, I'm still waiting for the answer, but I believe it's November 30th. You have to have, if you're changing anything, you would have to have that all squared away before then. And you couldn't go any later. That we're already building budgets before then. However, that's the date that they have, and so that idea. As you're moving along and you need to make some shifts, I think you just want to think about that. But it's always good to have
Right.
And
I think a related question, but can you just explain again, like the role of the RPC committee? This is making this proposal, and should something pass, in all the towns, does that committee is that the work of that committee done? Does that committee not exist anymore? Right. If things don't pass, if one town or whatever doesn't vote, then does the RPC still exist? Like, it's what you said earlier about it's like goes back to the board or whatever. Like, basically after the vote, if we want to do something else, it starts over from the RPC perspective.
You would most likely have to go back to the process of asking each board to vote to
continue an RPC.
That's some nuance I would have to ask. If the vote failed, then you go back to square one, and then you say, okay, then you have to go back to each community and each board, because you start with the school boards. It all starts with the school boards. and to do that piece, and then.
Can I ask one more process question? Oh, I'll pass. I'll keep rolling on this. Well, actually, no, I do have it. What's the role of the school boards? Like, so the RPC, we're getting an update as the AOS board, but ultimately the RPC is hosting these forums and putting forth this proposal, and then there's November ballots. Is there a process by which the school committees are going to be asked to formally weigh in on the proposal, or is there something between now and the vote where we are more than updated or showing up for forums in our community? You know, like, is there a formal role of the school committees between now and these town votes?
No. Not that I'm aware of. In all the statutes, and, there was nothing in there in terms of that piece.
The RPC is like half school committee members. I mean, yes, I hear what you're.
It's not like the town budgets where it's like, and then the warrant committee recommends this, or the school, or the council recommends this. There's not like a formal process by which the school boards are voting in on this first or anything like that.
Direct to voters by means of the RPCs.
Thanks for clarifying. That was what I understood. But.
What's the bus gonna look like, the schedule and everything, has that been looked at, like, for the kids that are on the south side of the eastern part of the island, or all the way around 7th and 8th grade for Southwest Harbor?
I talked with Lauren and taking a look at what the longest bus run may be. And if someone was coming from that side, let's say to go to Mount Desert, would be no more than 40 minutes. And actually, right now, there's some Mount Desert kids that live over in Pretty Marsh or Whitney Farm Road. That, depending on traffic, you might be taking 40 minutes to get all the way around the sound and to go. And then in terms of Bar Harbor, that bus that goes out on Indian Point Road, oftentimes students might, depending on traffic, might be at about 40 minutes. It wouldn't be any longer than that. And then we also know that transition from Trenton to Southwest Harbor, we have some experience with that with elementary kids in terms of summer school and getting on the bus at Southwest Harbor and going to Trenton. Of course, there's more depending on where you live in Trenton, let's say doing the middle school thing and going the other way, but it wouldn't be an outrageous amount of time. You start thinking about communities in Fort Kent and other parts of more rural parts of the state of Maine, there might be places where kids are riding an hour or more on a bus. Thankfully, we don't have to deal with that. The number is pretty reasonable.
Will be the same amount of bus drivers needed, or do you have to hire?
Haven't gotten into that detail yet on that.
Would there be busing for like after school activities? Because looking at that looked like a nightmare for me. I mean, like I would have had 3 kids in 3 different schools all at the same time, and if they all did after school activities, I could pick up one.
I think that is the hope. That's
So much fun.
Yeah, I guess the only question is like, is there any way that we could do like a soft vote? So that way we could possibly have a better feel of what our communities actually want to see happen. Yeah, just because the people that are going to engage with us in the public forums are not going to be our voters, or aren't going to be the ones that necessarily show up to vote, especially in Tremont's case. So is there any way for us to get like a more valid, or yeah, but like through like a more formal process, and it's like a fake vote, just so that way we can possibly like push it back maybe then, or provide more information.
But I think also door-to-door probably
is the best.
I'm not saying it's superior, but I mean it probably is a critical component of this plan.
And then one more follow-up, just in terms of those public forums, is it just going to be like the same presentation for each town?
Yeah, I think because we would cover the components of the plan, and then
Like the bigger picture stuff.
and then some kind of process that allows for gathering feedback in a thoughtful manner.
And then, sorry, I just had a question about the timeline. It all passes, everybody's like, yay, middle school. What school year does Southwest Middle School open?
I think if that was to happen, then a group would get together that would be educators, staff members, to start thinking about that process and how long it might take, because you'll be evaluating schools and assessing their readiness for that. So it might take maybe 2 years.
So
It really depends on. Could be.
And I think the RPC can also build a phase into the recommendation to say, like, the professionals would take over on the tax, but we could say we're recommending that it be phased in over at least 2 years or whatever teacher there is.
and then also the Penitent kids, there's choice, and then the kids that don't have a parent working in this town or something like that, like if reason to go to a specific town, are they being split up evenly between wherever they're going to Mount Desert? And the reason
Default is not Desert.
the fallout.
The default.
And that's because Mount Desert has such a low number of students, I'm assuming. Like we have our fourth and fifth grades are switched together, and our first and second grades are switched together.
It's a building that's prepared to accept without an extensive, like expansion or something like that.
And how many students does that?
Was 200. I have that number. It's not easy.
So 200 students.
200 plus.
Combined, not.
Yeah.
Yeah, all together.
I might just say that the choice component for just that one committee, I wonder if that will be a thing for some voters who have, I don't know. I'm not gonna be able to get it. I'm just putting it out there that might be a little funny, but I don't know. It seems like a small thing that might be tricky.
No, it's good.
Yeah, I just think it's such a tiny little thing that I feel like it's a school choice has been a little bit of a sticky issue I think for a bit, so I wonder if that would be unaffordable.
Yeah, just in terms of, because we're talking a lot about like regular instruction, but I know the ultimate goal was to kind of help out with the special services that are required, especially behavioral issues and stuff like that. How far away are we from seeing a SUN program indefinitely, or what does that look like? Like providing the special services for our students when they are just as separated as they are now?
Within an RSU, it's a lot easier to build that program because you're starting from a mindset of these are all of our students. Currently, it's really difficult to be able to build a program within a school and then do the economic side of supporting that in terms of the way that the AOS is structured. And so, having the RSU structure makes that process a little bit easier. We are thinking about that for, our particularly around the area of 3 and 4-year-olds, and what that could potentially look like because of this CDS transition. And depending on how all of this happens, it's something we'll have to think about. But I think there has to be a really strong mindset shift for adults around the fact that these are, regardless of whether you're a Trenton student or you're a Bar Harbor student, and we have an opportunity where we might have a place where a child's specific needs can be met, but they're all of our kids. And sometimes our kids can be really difficult, and sometimes they can't. And that's okay, because we're trying to meet their needs as best they can. That's sometimes harder to do with in an AOS with very distinct schools. It's a little bit easier to do in terms of thinking with a mindset, both organizationally, but I think there's also a mindset shift in terms of thinking about our students rather than Southwest Harbor students or Swans Island students.
So just in general timeline, like from when we get to RSU to when we might see like some program or really more intensive special services.
I don't have that.
Yeah, okay.
But it would, as we moved along and thinking about that structure, it would be part of that process.
One of the things I was thinking as you were going through the presentation, thank you, it was detailed, and I can tell how much work has gone into it along the way, so kudos to you all for doing that. Is I was thinking of actually how many points that it hit of things that were, things that the island and the community, the district wanted to see. Like, they didn't want to see, nobody wanted to see a school closed. Nobody wanted to add, well, most people were like not wanting to build another building, or maybe that came from the school boards, like knowing how much those cost to build a brand new building somewhere on another place, at another site. So anyway, I was just thinking through that, and you may want to consider, or maybe we want to consider having some sort of like a, highlighting those things, you know, highlighting, not only is this a really comprehensive plan that meets a lot of the goals that you have set forth, and the mindset that these are all our children that we are working to educate together, but also it does hit on values and things that were really important to different communities, and sort of really putting those out there, how it meets those goals. That might just be like a sort of a cover page in many ways, or have something at the end that can be part of a wrap up. So people don't forget that this conversation has gone on for so long. I mean, I was the chair of the middle school committee, and that was, I don't even know when we finished that. And that was work that was built on that happened 20 years before. So highlighting those like wins, that how you managed to create some options that met some goals that have been talked about for a really long time might be an important thing just to put out to people. People want information. They want to have the meetings, they want to have conversations. Whether or not they'll be able to show up, you don't know, but I think that would be helpful.
I agree, also because people leave and enter this conversation and have over many years, but a lot of the solutions that are in here come out of like responding to these persistent long-term interests and trying to understand that. And depending on when people came or went into the conversation, not everyone's been part of that. So kind of framing that out. We should probably wrap up this discussion as time is going on. But if you have more questions, please reach out, and we will update again. Thank you for that. Excellent.
And this will be on the ALS website under reorganization of the top of city.
It's getting late, so I'm going to try to zip through these things. I have this statement that I drafted in response to Lynn and Renee coming to us just saying that, you know, that at last meeting that faculty and students and staff wanted to understand where the board was at. And so it's basically, it's not anything new, it's just what Mike outlined in terms of us following the law and continuing to create a welcoming and affirming home for our students. But I think it felt, and I talked to Renee, and afterwards it felt important for them to hear from the board, like this, that we're, you know, because there's just like so much chatter that this is where things are at. So. Oh, and that's right. We need one more.
Did you say it would be put someplace?
I was just gonna share it with Renee and Lynn, share with staff.
Got it.
Any other questions, comments?
The only thing I would add is, I know we're encouraging them to reach out. Where are they reaching out to? Right, this is a member or,
Oh, I'll include mine and Mike's.
that's all.
Thank you. Yes, thank you.
And will this, is this going on, like, is it sending out via email to all teachers?
Just teachers, yeah.
Okay. And then hoping that they'll share with students. How is this getting to the students?
Through
Just
staff.
Just hoping that teachers, I think it's really important messaging.
I think we can, at least at the high school, we can push it to our students so that they see it through our messaging system through Bright Arrow.
My other question is like, why is it going to all parents, like the typical
Oh, it
AOS
could go to,
message?
yeah, it could go to parents too.
I don't know what it is, if we're giving it to students and we're
Like
giving
that
it
way.
to faculty, then it
Yeah, I
might as
mean, I
well
think
go
if
to
it goes to
parents.
Bright Arrow, it goes to parents, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can you
Okay.
put it in the editorial section to use
I mean, I have but it's not really intended for, I mean, the
Right.
point is for members of the school community, because I don't want people, it's that people understand that they don't feel like, what's happening? Whatever, so.
I think it's very well written.
Okay, moving on to first reading of revisions to policy JKE, detention of students.
And so this is just a revision. Our old policy had that there were Saturday detentions at the high school. That doesn't happen anymore. So to remove that, also had information about detentions being given for academic situations. So we wanted to make sure that that was out there and that it met the matched what current practices. So those were the adjustments that were done there.
Any questions? Okay, well, this will come back for final review next time. Now we have our action items, which is first and final readings of revisions to policies, and these are based on changes in law, largely.
We need to go back in terms of for the Title IX policies to the 2020 version that we had, not the 2024 version. So what we have to do is pass the AC, the ACAA, the ACAR, ACAB, ACABR, which were the procedures that were put in place prior to this. Yes. And the protections that existed within those still are the protections that we have that hold true through Maine law and the Maine Human Rights Act, so nobody is losing anything. There are some procedural pieces. The actual newer Title IX regulations were actually a little bit more responsive in terms of for victims and for the collection of information that a Title IX coordinator would need to do. Those have been sort of stripped out and going back to the older piece. And so it's just a little, in terms of the procedure side of it, it just takes a little bit longer and is not as responsive in terms of the Title IX side of it. However, in terms of harassment, regardless of who you are and the experience that you have, that all of the protections still exist. It's just this part of what's considered Title IX is changing.
Right, and through board policy and state law, there continues to be a remedy available to you, and students should continue to pursue, even if Title IX has slimmed down, students should still, and faculty, anyone should still feel like they can reach out, that they should reach out to their administrators, if they feel like they've been, I mean, not as our Title IX coordinator here, but if they feel like they've been, you know, experienced some kind of bullying or harassment or anything, like nothing about, these changes in policies don't mean that that remedies are not available.
Right.
Are the changes somewhere obvious, like the changes to procedure in here, like are they highlighted in a different?
They're yellow.
They're
Yellow
yellow,
and the third one, okay.
So you want to get a motion on the floor first before we go to discussion?
So this is, we're just putting ourselves in compliance with the state law.
With the federal law.
For Title IX.
And
So
what
we're going
happens
back
if we don't do it?
Well, we can have our own policies, but, and we do, and I hope we, you know, vigorously pursue those, but but the federal law has changed, so we would just be out of compliance with our law, our policy would not be in compliance with the law, I guess. I hear what you're saying.
And these procedures match, you know, there's better protections in Maine law and the Maine Human Rights Act. And so these, this is 2020, so not too long ago, that these were sort of in place. It just removes this Title IX slice. And in terms of if a Title IX investigation is going to happen, then it becomes the messier version, because the 2020 version was a messier version, and again, wasn't as, I think, available to.
For many students, a Title IX investigation doesn't provide them the best remedy. It doesn't provide them the best solution to their problem as a non-Title IX. You know, especially now, like, I think that's unfortunate, but it's, I don't think it's something we can.
I'm just clarifying, so this is the federal government telling us at the state level, we can't do what we want?
No, no. If
Okay.
at the state level, the state still, nothing's changed about state law, but federal, Title IX is a federal law.
Yep.
So you can't pursue a Title IX, I mean, or the circumstances and the means through which you pursue a Title IX complaint have changed.
Okay.
You can still go to Rhonda and say, like, these things happened to me, and she can offer you these solutions, but it won't. And I mean, you can still, for certain things, you can still pursue a Title IX case, but it's a very cumbersome process. So I think Rhonda should talk more than me, but for a lot of students, like, even if their claim falls under Title IX, it's such an arduous process that it doesn't turn out to be the solution that works better for them.
Okay. And we had identified in 2020, based on a lot of work that was done prior, particularly around the transgender policy, and then and taking a look at sexual harassment, and actually defined a category of board policy that there's certain specific actions that the board and administration that takes umbrage to in terms of being able to address, you know, certain concerns. So even within that 2020 policy, we broadened it out. It's just this Title IX slice in terms of what you can bring there, and, you know, then be identified as a Title IX issue.
So the supports are there for everyone who needs them. It's just how we get there is clunky and longer. There are these like 10-day waiting periods that you have to do to make sure that people have time to get back to you, and it's a really long, drawn out process. But people will still be supported, and we'll do what we need to do to make them feel
So
good
I
about
just wanted
being
to
here.
clarify that the federal government is interfering with, okay. Saying they won't, but this is what's happening. Okay.
You want to get these things?
Yeah.
And they're all very similar, so I
Right.
think it's appropriate for me to make a slide.
Yes.
Okay, so move approval of policies AC, ACAA, ACAA-R, ACAB, ACAD-R.
Is there a second? Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed?
Who's, sorry, I'm just,
I don't know if I don't,
Okay.
I was gonna ask Aaron
These two
if I'm
just
voting.
voted, so I'm gonna put them down as voting.
I showed up
You're
late,
on,
so.
Curtis.
Huh?
You're on.
I am voting? No, Aaron says no.
Writing.
We have three.
I have one question. Does this all look the same to the students? Like they go through the means that they do?
We have only had the current procedure since September,
No, months.
Oh, months.
Not
Okay.
months, since September, really.
But no, it would not look the same.
No, it would not look the same. I mean, I think many people would choose to pursue their thing through a non-title
Yeah.
nine avenue, is what will happen.
But what I mean is like something happens to the students, they're not like, they all know that they still have.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yes, yes, yes.
So it's really just our back end process.
Yes.
How we're doing this change.
Yes.
Well, okay, second reading and approval of revisions to policies ACAB, hazing, and accommodation of sincere employees and retired. We covered these last time, for fall. Is there a motion on the hazing policy that we can cover in discussion?
Move approval of policy ACAD hazing.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, moving on to accommodation of IMBB.
So I move approval of policy IMBB, accommodation of sincere beliefs and required instruction.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Okay, and so below is, we don't need to do anything, it's just this is the deleted.
We have.
Well, we have to vote, can we vote today on the slate to delete these
Yeah.
policies?
So I would move approval of deletion of policies ACAA-R1, ACAA-R2, ACAB-R1, ACAB-R2.
Second. Any discussion? All in favor? Any other business? Future agenda items. We'll have our usual reports and updates. We'll have the return of these policies that we did first readings of. Any other agenda items? Selena will work on that.
We don't employ any teachers, so there's no probationary teachers there. No.
Okay, any public comment? Next meeting will be Monday, 14th of April, 2025. Is there a motion to go into a very quick executive session? Pursuant to 1 MRSA 405-16